Good evening, everybody. Although it doesn't feel like an evening because the clocks have changed, it just feels to me like it's summer. You know, it's kind of like, it doesn't feel like evening, it feels like afternoon, which is also quite nice. I have a wonderful panel for you this evening. I'm really excited about this. We've already got the conversation going. So I was like, stop. We need to get the audience into the room so that they can hear all of this fabulous information that's coming from everyone on our panel. So I'm really delighted to introduce you to everybody. In fact, I'm not going to introduce you to everybody because that's far too complicated for me to do as a mere presenter. So I'm Becky, I'm working for Weston-super-Mare Town Council. I'm their comms and marketing officer. And we do this as part of our climate change working party and part of our climate change commitment that we want to bring to you thoughts, ideas about our local area, but also things that you can do in your own home to be able to maybe change some of the ways in which you do things, maybe things that you didn't even know that you're doing. I've already been educated a little bit this evening about garden waste, and we shall come to that. We shall talk about that. But if you don't mind, shall we start ladies first? Just like Jenny's like, really? So tell us a little bit about you, what your passions are, what your interests are, what your work is, and anything that's relevant to the conversation.
So my name is Janine Connor, and I've been working as a countryside ranger across most of the south of England for almost sort of 10 years now. So I've worked for a range of organisations and local authorities looking after all sorts of different habitats and wildlife. And I've worked in North Somerset now for maybe sort of 7 years. So my sort of general passion is protecting sort of the local environment. I was always quite passionate about looking after the world, you know, the world and wildlife and its habitats, but I realised I could do a lot more and have a lot more impact by actually sort of working within a local area. I've worked in sort of woodland habitats, like managing and creating woodland habitats and grassland and orchards as well. I'm really passionate about orchards. So yeah.
Perfect, thank you. We're really glad that you're here with us. David Dagucis, hello, how are you? Good evening. Please introduce yourself to everyone.
Hello. Well, I'm an entomologist. For all my life, I've been studying moths and butterflies, especially the small moths. I took it a bit more seriously when I did some research and attached to the Natural History Museum in London. I do quite a bit of work in Africa, but I'm always interested in what's around. I used to have a house on the edge of Dolbury Warren, and that was when I first got to know this part of the world. And now I'm in the middle of Weston, and so I'm rather more constrained in an urban area, but I still keep an eye on what's happening.
Lovely, thank you so much. And now we've got another David who we're going to call Dave Gibbs. Hello.
Hello, yes, name's David Gibbs, and I work as a consultant ecologist specialising in entomology, invertebrates. My main interests are Diptera, but I take an interest in the whole range of stuff, and also very keen on botany and being a bird watcher for pretty much all my life. Moved to Weston 5 years ago now, and have very much spent time in the local habitats, especially Sand Bay and Uphill and places like that. And so only just getting to know it locally, really. But, yeah.
Perfect stuff. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Dennis Starling. Hello.
Hello, I'm Dennis Starling. I moved to Weston 19 years ago when I retired, and I've been interested in insects. There seem to be a lot of us interested in insects this evening, or ever since before I can remember. And I used to breed moths and other things. And at an early age, I was interested in how they relate to the environment. And of course, breeding them, it led me on to an interest in plants and a general interest. I back onto Weston Woods. I used to run one of David's moth traps. So I still keep up an interest in the subject.
That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much. So thank you, everybody. So just before we went live onto Facebook, we were talking about garden waste. So that's going to be my first question to you. But anyone who is viewing this, if you've got any questions at all, or comments or thoughts, no contradictions or arguments. These are no, I'm kidding. If you've got a difference of opinion, you can also put that in the comments as well, and we'll swiftly ignore you. I'm only kidding. But if there's anything that you want to know, any questions, then do please put them into the comments, and we'll try our very, very best to swing around to them. So David Darling, before we kind of went live, you came up with a really interesting comment that I hadn't thought of. Now, many of us know that North Somerset Council, they're changing the way in which we're doing garden waste. So I've paid my £50, I've got my sticker from a bin. What could this mean for the environment? Please tell us about that.
Well, it's unintended consequences when such decisions are made. And it occurred to me it could lead to more fly tipping. And particularly with garden waste, it's not as obvious when someone leaves furniture in the middle of the street. And it could lead to alien species going out into the wild, which can do quite a bit of damage sometimes. And this is the sort of thing that it looks like a good idea at the time, but there are consequences that won't appear until much later on.
So with my normal hat on, I'd think, well, hang on a minute, because if I've got something that just needs to be composed, so I've got some cuttings from a bush, I've cut back my wisteria, I've chucked all of that in the bin. I just, you know, I mean, does it really matter if I'm just kind of tucking it away somewhere in the wild? You know, nobody's going to see it, not going to get in anyone's way, and it's just going to decompose. That with my grass cuttings. What's so wrong about doing that if it's just going to decompose naturally anyway?
Well, there's some plants, for instance, Lamium, which is often seen in hanging baskets. If you know Clevedon Castle, the whole of the woodland there is now covered with this alien species. Or it was last time I went there. And I see it growing in other places as well. And it's not a native. Yeah. And it does take over.
Yeah, one thing that might be of interest in Weston Woods is the Spanish bluebells. The bulbs of the bluebells do not decompose in a compost bin for a very, very long time. So unless they're cut into tiny bits, if they're thrown out of a car into a side of a car park, and you can already see down at Qstoke, nearly all the bluebells next to Qstoke car park are Spanish bluebells, and they will eventually approach upon the wild bluebells up in on Worlebury Hill and hybridize and eliminate them.
The other thing is, I think that people think that compost is good for the garden and therefore good for wildlife. But the most interesting things around here on the limestone are the things which want a very poor soil. And so the compost is the last thing you want for them. You want poor soil, and then the plants which can't thrive in overgrown situations have a space to move.
And there's also, just as a sort of a management side, you know, as soon as people start dropping large amounts of, let's say, green waste, it still does have a knock-on effect that people might think it's okay. And from my experience, if you've got any kind of litter, even if it's green waste and it looks sort of slightly out of place, you know, you'll get more and more and more, and then there's that knock-on effect that people then feel like it's okay to do it. So, you know, there's someone who manages and has to deal with getting rid of green waste on our nature reserves or SSSI sites. You know, you end up then getting more and more of different types of rubbish. So it's just about that sort of respect of, you know, if it's just you know, just not to sort of drop it in anything in the first place, you know, because the knock-on effect is, you know, has a massive impact.
That's right.
And of course, these are the things that we don't really realise, do we? It's just, you know, as normal people, you just think that's just green waste, so that's okay. What about seed bombs? because there's quite a lot of sort of thought about making seed bombs and throwing them out of car windows, obviously, watch out for cyclists and motorbikes, to chuck them onto like desolate patches of wasteland. Is that a good thing to do? Are we going to have nice poppies just popping up everywhere, or is this a bad idea that we hadn't thought of?
Maybe I'll come in here. The term wasteland is one I've been fighting against for years. Nearly all of our rare insects live on what people think of as wasteland, industrial areas. Farmland is all covered in poisons or heavily gardened, as it were. And nearly all the really interesting stuff is on little corners, like where the old gasworks has been pulled down, and Western Airport, where the old airfield there. So all of these little areas which have become derelict and are not disturbed by people very much, and have got open areas with, as David said just now, very poor soil, like often clay caps and rubbish tips, for example. It takes a very long time for the coarse shrubs like salad willows and brambles to completely destroy it, completely shade it over. And so many species which don't have a foothold even in nature reserves, because nature reserves are often climax communities, so many species which you don't find in nature reserves are found in precisely these places which people think of as wastelands. They're often the best sites for insects. They often mimic, for example, riverside shingles, which just don't exist anymore because all the rivers are managed. They mimic coastal habitats, landslips, which again are often very rare because coastlines are managed so much. So all these pioneer habitats, as I prefer to call them, are very valuable for many insects, especially those that love really hot, sunny places in the south of England. Heathland is another very rare habitat, and these ex-industrial sites and so-called wasteland often attract the same kind of species which might otherwise be on the heathland.
This is, I certainly echo what Dave has said. As I can remember one time I was looking for a very rare moth in Scotland, and it's known to feed on plants of the cabbage family, and there was a common sort of weed called Dame's Violet. And we found some of this in a derelict garage. And there was a very keen naturalist there who said, oh no, a terrible place like that. But that was where we found it. It was the first time the larva of that species had been found in the British Isles. And it was in this ghastly, burnt out garage, broken down. And there was this moth there.
So
yes, I remember the bomb sites in London after the war. One of the first things to take over was the plant that the elephant hawk moth feeds on, roseberry willow herb. It covered ambadlias as well, and it brought species into the centre of London which hadn't been seen for years.
So interesting. We've got a comment from Johnny Boxall. Hello, Johnny. He is the lead in Grove Park, and he says, we'll go back to the waste thought. He said, we have a fair amount of fly tipping. This is in Grove Park. Some, but very little of it is green waste. This, along with other dumped waste, is generally tipped by people who do not engage with what is available, possible through waste streams. Generally investing in removing our green waste in order that it is properly maintained is something that each and all of us need to subscribe to if we are to actively make a difference to our nature engagement. So I don't know if you have any comments on what Johnny said there.
If only people would, but the trouble is not everybody will.
No.
That's a very good point. So we were talking there a little bit about moths, and I want to just talk about a preconceived idea that moths eat your clothes. So, David, are all moths after your undies?
No, very few, a very small number. There's a little family called Tiniidae, of which are the classic clothes moths. There's one or two other house moths in another family, but altogether, probably only 5 or 6 species are commonly eating clothes. In the wild, they would be feeding on natural detritus, the sort of thing you get in birds' nests. But of course, we've made our own nests, and they find the rubbish to eat there. But very few of them are clothes moths, and some of the real clothes moths have become quite scarce now, and so they're sought after by people like me.
So,
And it's not just moths, there's the carpet beetle as well, which probably does even more damage than the moths.
I've been exploring with some people at Bristol University something about the clothes moths, because originally many of them lived in the same places as bats. And these clothes moths actually emit ultrasound, the same kind of stuff that bats use for their echolocation. And that's presumably to stop them getting eaten by the bats.
Oh, that's fascinating.
that's so unbelievably smart. That's completely blown my mind. That's great.
Things are quite smart if they want to survive. And they've had a few million years to practice it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what, you know, this sounds like a very strange question, but what did moths ever do for us? Like what, I mean, moths are one of those things that, you know, I've seen quite a few kind of like large chrysalises in the gardens, things like that. And moths are quite often mistaken for butterflies, but it seems like there's an area of disappointment when we find out that something is a moth and not a butterfly. Why is that?
I suppose it's because people are used to moths flying around a lamp and scattering scales around when they bump into people, and some people have a phobia about the texture of moths. And of course, a lot of them are fairly dull to looking at because they've got to hide away during the day and not get eaten by birds. The ones which are full of poison, they advertise their presence with gaudy colours to stop them getting eaten by birds who learn that they're not nice. But I mean, what did moths do for us? They're part of the whole of ecology, and it's such a complicated business. But now there's fewer of them, and that's one of the reasons we're getting fewer birds, because there are less insects around.
Well, they pollinate as well, particularly at night.
And that's something we don't really think about moths being pollinators. That's not something that you think of. You always think of bees doing that.
Yeah, well, I would add flies and beetles in there as well. Flies are probably more important pollinators than bees. So certainly for more open general plants, bees are more specialist for like tube plants, and they've got their long tongues. So but those open, you know, umbellifers and the daisies and things, flies are probably the main pollinators of those, although very little research has been done. Certainly when people send me specimens for identification, when they're doing pollination studies, it's nearly all flies.
Well, a lot of the flowers only emit their pollen or available during the day, aren't they? And so less of them are available to moths.
That would make sense. So for those of us who have gone out and bought a bug house, why haven't they moved in? Do bug houses work?
Well, if you mean by bug house, those bits of wood with lots of holes drilled in them, or the bamboo sticks sticking in them, to get bees to nest in.
Yes, it's all of that. So that they usually have kind of like the bamboo holes, and then there'll be other kind of different holes and things. So it looks like a house, and it's got lots of different compartments. Yes. And I know that there's lots of different styles of them. Whenever I see them, they don't seem to be kind of creeping with crawlies. No,
I've had no success myself. And that these are mainly intended to attract solitary bees, such as the osmia, what's it called, red mason bee, which is the main pollinator of apple trees. and there are the leaf cutter bees come on a little bit later in the year. And they are the two main species which will take up these things. But the trick is if you can find somebody who's had success and has got the bees nesting in their bamboo, or then to borrow or to take one of their bamboo things and put it in yours, because the bees will use the bee house that they emerge from. So borrow one from somebody else who's had success, put it in your bee house, and then they will the youngsters that will come out will use the other suitable sized bamboos around it. But it's very hit and miss to get them to use a fresh one.
I think it's my experience of bug hotels are often almost like habitat piles, and that kind of thing as well. You have to have patience with it. If I make a habitat pile at work as part of the woodland ecology, I'm expecting 3 years before it sort of really started to decompose down and you're getting things living in it. So, although you've bought it quickly, it might take a much longer time to actually get something from it.
Debbie Acted's just commented and she said, I've got a bug house at present, but I haven't put it outside yet. But something's already moved in already indoors. There are signs of what looks like sawdust around it, and I have no idea what's got in there though. I hope it's not woodworm.
Oh, a death watch.
Good. What can we do in our gardens to look after insects and things, apart from maybe not use Roundup?
Oh, Roundup's a herbicide, isn't it? I think.
I don't know. Spray. It's weed killing spray.
It's weed
killer. Just plant. Get plenty of plants that have lots of pollen and nectar. Is the main thing, and don't be tidy. Let the lawn do what it wants to do. Don't cut it too much.
Also, let there be areas of leaf matter as well, and leaf mulch. That's really good for sort of a natural decomposing soil, and you'll get some good sort of mycelium and like mushroom species, which will also have a positive impact on if you've got trees in your garden. So yeah, definitely be a lot tidier, and have areas of sort of wildflower meadows. So maybe just a strip of wildflower. Leaving your grass to, like Dave said, leaving your grass to grow long for a little bit and see what happens, and maybe not expect a beautiful poppy wildflower meadow, but have a look what's in there. The grasses that our native grasses are gorgeous and have a really important role to play for invertebrates and all sorts. So step back maybe.
It's not just the case of the adults feeding too, because the early stages, the caterpillars, often like some leaves to live on. I know my wife is always complaining because we've got some mullein in the garden, and this lovely mullein moth comes along with a highly coloured caterpillar and eats nearly all of the leaves of the mullein, and she complains, and I have to say, well, wait until they've finished, and then the mullein can have the flowers. But species which are native to Britain are much more likely to get wild creatures eating them. You may not want them, you may not want your cabbages to be eaten, but only things which could occur naturally are going to live on them.
Yes, when we moved here, backing onto Weston Woods, the top of the garden, which is above the top of the bungalow, it looked to me as though it was part of the original downland. So that's how I treated it. And I've imported things like yellow rattle and all sorts of other things. Even in the area where I keep the grass shorter, it's full of scabious and that sort of thing.
Lovely.
Hello to Chris Berring, who says, come and see my garden. It's rewilding on steroids. Brian Down has said, are there local recorders for insects so that we can know what is within locally? I have seen dotted bee flies in the area for the first time, and it would be good to know if there are new or established here. Any thoughts on the spotted bee fly?
Yeah, I did a study of the dotted bee fly, Bonvilliers discolor, in 1999, and I found a very large colony at Uphill Quarry, and also along the edges of Walborough Hill nearby there. I've never seen it in my garden on the north side of Weston, so I'd be interested to know where this sighting has come from. But there is no local recording, but there's a Facebook group, the Larger Brachycera Facebook group, where you can post your sightings of bee flies, and there is a national recording scheme for that, but there's nothing. I suppose Bristol Entomology Society might be interested in records. They might publish them annually, but I haven't been in touch with them recently.
We've got bee flies in the garden on the opposite side of the woods to where you are, so there are plenty around at the moment.
Are they dotted bee flies or dark-edged bee flies?
We got two types.
Oh, right. Oh,
got one with the dark body and others with the brown body as well. But,
the wing pattern.
Yes. Oh, yes. There's some with wing patterns on too.
Mm.
That's great. So we'll find out from Brian if Brian can message back and let us know. Oh, he says two sightings at Pern Hill and Prince Consort Gardens.
Well, Prince Consort Gardens is very interesting because I've never seen it on this side. Pern Hill is that's where that's the place I'd expect to see dotted bee fly. Not far from Uphill, where there's a big colony.
The records, the Bristol Bristol area record centre does keep a lot of these records. And they do include Weston, even though we're out on the edge of the area.
Another thing in the time that we've been here is some day flying moths. The scarlet tiger, for instance, you would not have seen in Weston 20 years ago, but it breeds in my garden now. And also the Jersey tiger, we see every year now.
So it sounds like things are getting better. Is it right to think that things are getting better? I mean,
well,
there's
other things are lost.
Hope there, or are things getting much worse? What do you think?
There are invaders. There are a number of invaders which are increasing their range, but at the cost of many things decreasing. And I've worked a moth trap for most of my life, and there are certainly many less not only specimens but species now overall, but you've got new ones coming in, often alien species which are colonizing the country.
I think you'll always have areas where species can come in and sort of do well, but overall sort of fragmentation of habitats and loss of habitat within the local area has had a massive impact on all sorts of different species. From my experience on, I monitor dormice. We used to have dormice in one of my little sections of woodland that I looked at, and now I haven't seen them there for 3 years. And I genuinely, from my experience, that is down to the fragmentation of their usual habitats, with roads or housing. So, there are positives in the changes that we see in climate change and habitats, and that's wonderful as someone who helps to manage the land. But on the other side of it, there's huge losses, and the benchmark of what we expect is changing so quickly.
Okay, so Brian said that he was trying to add an image, but it won't let him. I'm not quite sure why that is, Brian, but what you could do is if you private message the town council page, I will try and open that and share my screen to share the image. So try doing that. And if that doesn't work, then I'm afraid maybe have to upload it later. It should allow you to upload an image, but I'm sorry if it doesn't. But you can always send it as a private message, and I'll open it and show the team by sharing my screen. If we can see it, then that would be really good. Debbie also said that the comfrey and green alligate, something like that, are going well at the moment, and the bees love it. So just to give you that comment as well.
I love lungwort. Lungwort's a lovely one to have, an early sort of flower for the bees.
I think you meant green alternate.
Yeah, that'll be it.
Yeah.
It's when things aren't a word you've never come across before. You do what you do at school: break up the letters.
And have tiny blue flowers.
Yes, I know what you mean. Yeah. Yes. So with that, so when we're looking at kind of like things that we can do to improve, the Weston Town Council have got a new volunteer programme called Love the Outdoors, where we're really asking for people to come and volunteer for a number of our different sites. So we've just got Ellenberg Park West, which has got some really unusual plants there, and very mossy kind of ground. We think that some of the unusual plants was the fact that during the war, US soldiers were camping there. We reckon seeds fell out of their pockets. That's the rumour. Who knows if that's true? Also, we'll be taking care of the quarry, and we have the wonderful site, which is Milton Road Cemetery as well. So anyone who's interested in volunteering and looking after those sites, that would be great. There's been some concern shared about badgers. So I know that we've been looking at building, I don't know what a badger flat is. It sounds lovely. I think I'd like one. But we've been looking at building badger flats for the badgers at Milton Road Cemetery. But with the opening up of Ellenberg Park with the badger set there, any advice and thoughts on how to take care of those badgers? Because obviously we don't let people use that gate. We've kept that area of Ellenberg Park completely overgrown to stop people wanting to wander down there. They'll probably trip up in a badger hole anyway. But any thoughts on any of those sites that you've got for us in terms of what would be good to do, great ways to look after them?
Badgers, I find, a terrible menace in the garden. They dig great big holes for their latrines. They're quite destructive. They're big, beastly things. I've just been reading an article about...
They're beautiful.
Well, yes, they are. Yes. I've just been reading an article about the badger cull. And it's, very interesting. They're not as bad as they're made out to be in terms of farming.
No, not at all. No, I think it's interesting. I don't know how big the parks you're talking about are, like in regards to sort of protecting them or looking after them. They probably look after themselves quite well.
I would say is quite huge.
Yeah, they will probably look after themselves quite well. And actually, the less you do, probably the better with badgers. If they feel overpressured by people, they will move out. It might well be a satellite site, because a lot of badgers will have their sort of main sort of breeding sites, which potentially are quite tucked away, and then they have satellite sites where it's just more of a place to chill out for the night when they're sort of searching for food elsewhere. So the set might be there, but it might not be regularly used as well. But the less you do with it, the better. The less from my, and legally as well, don't have any input on it. So if it's a big park and a big site, they're obviously they're uncomfortable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I know the set at Milton Park Cemetery. It's tucked away in the corner. It's clearly not a satellite site. It's a big set, and there seems to be a lot of activity there. I've not seen the one in Ellenberg Park, but there is a satellite one in Grove Park. There's just a single thing. So yeah, I would say just leave them alone. Just don't need to bother them really.
And the less you do, the better. To be honest,
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I'm going to, if I can, share my screen with you so that I can show you the letter that the photograph that came in. Can you see that? That's the photograph that came in from Brian of the spotted bee. and it's
Yeah,
quite interesting. You can actually see the spots there. Can you see that? Okay?
Yeah, that's it. Looks like a male to me.
How can you tell that?
I think the female has a row of white spots on the terminal abdominal segments, and also you can just about make out that the eyes are touching on the head. I haven't got my glasses on, but I think that's right.
Yeah, I think you are right. That's incredible. I thought that you had some kind of microscopic other thing going on there, but we'll this is a family show. We'll leave that conversation where it lies.
No, different. They've got these big white spots on the abdomen.
Wow, that's really interesting. So thank you so much for sending that photo in, Brian. We have another comment as well. So Richard Weaver has said, we are designing part of our, dedicating, or anyway, part of our garden to bees and wildflowers. We have put in a hedgehog house, loads of wildflower seeds. We also have 2 foxes who come into the garden. We have had them on our wildlife cameras one night. They were playing for a good hour. What a wonderful thing to see. That must be very exciting. What do you think about wildlife cameras and things like that? Do you think that that's a good way of being able to see what's going on in your garden?
Yes, it'll work, but it would particularly interest me. But I'd just like to see what, keep an eye out and see. But if you've got some things you think you're not sure what's happening, then yeah, they might mainly be useful to see what the cat's getting up to. But
yes, and cats are another thing with it's making me giggle because I left my back door open today and my neighbour's cat walked in. Hello, one of those things. Dog completely ignored it. Debbie Apt had said, I think that the badgers at Ellenberg Park have been there for some time, as we used to get them coming into our garden before the neighbours next door blocked the fence up. Johnny Boxall has said, Dave, any advice on the satellite site in Grove Park for badgers? We've planted hawthorn and are allowing it to rewilding as naturally as possible to rehide it, ? I'm sorry if I've read that really badly. Sometimes things don't phonetically come out. Does that make any sense what I've said?
Yeah, just that's absolutely fine. I would have thought. I'm not a mammologist, but I would have thought that they wouldn't be there if they weren't didn't feel secure. So just let it grow naturally, and they'll be fine.
Yeah, and Richard mentioned you legally can't touch a badger set. Absolutely, and Johnny says he wrote it badly. He did. Richard said legally you can't touch a badger set. No, we're all about looking after our badgers, Richard. So we're all about protecting the badgers. So that's a good thing. What would be your top tips, if I can go round to everybody, to say to people if they've just started, because I think COVID has given us a real opportunity to reflect with lockdown. And for many of us, we've actually found a new love of nature and new interests, because basically walks in nature was one of the few things that was still open and available to us and actually, actively encouraged. So for those of us who've kind of go, ecky thump, I didn't know there was an outside, from working at home so much. How can we explore these passions? Because obviously this has been passions for you guys for a long time. But what sort of things would you say to people if you've started to become interested in wildlife? Here's a good direction for you. So let's ladies first again. We'll start there and then I'll work my way around the screen. Sorry.
That's okay. I mean, just exploring your local area really, and starting to learn about it, and obviously people are doing that a lot more, and understand the sort of sensitivity about what's around you, and how intricate the natural world is, and just explore your local area, and sort of support or get involved with like local charities or local organizations. And just try and get involved with with things where you can. If you're if that's, if you've just started getting into sort of certain specific areas, there's all sorts of organizations that that you can follow and get involved with.
That's great. David Dagucis can ask you that same question.
I think it's a pity there isn't a local natural history society. When I was a kid, there were such things, because you learn much better going around with others and they point out things. And so the more people have the chance post-COVID to meet with others and look at things together. Dennis used to lead a U3A natural history group. Bristol naturalists have a group with meetings around the place. But if you're getting together with experts, you will learn quite quickly from others at first hand.
Great. Dennis, as he's talked about you, you're next.
Yeah, I suppose I would say don't necessarily treat every insect that you see in the garden as an enemy. It's very often to be frightened by an insect because some of them sting. If you leave them alone, they won't do you any harm. If I frequently get bumblebees to crawl onto my hand. If I find them on the floor, I would, and they won't sting you, provided you don't put them under pressure, as it were. Just let them go where they want to.
Absolutely. Dave, what are your thoughts?
I think that the combination of the internet and digital cameras, everyone's got a digital camera with them on their phone nowadays, gives people the opportunity, people who have not any expertise in, but just an interest in, maybe not even owning a book, the opportunity to get names put on things, like joining Facebook groups, especially, posting photographs, and probably somebody will be, as long as your photograph is sufficient, somebody will tell you what it is. And this is a way that people can get into these things. And although most people will probably leave it at that, a few of those people may go on to be the researchers and surveyors of insects, plants, fungi. Fungi is something I've got into recently up in the woods up here, and they're very, very interesting. There's a lot of stuff, and they make great photos. You don't need sophisticated camera equipment because you can get right up close, and the larger ones often allow you to take photographs which can often be identified, at least to a certain level. As I say, and then hopefully some of those people will become the experts of the future.
That's great. And there's some very interesting documentaries about mushrooms and things like that you can find on Netflix, believe it or not. Like, amazing. Debbie Apted has written in now, she says, every year we have ants burrowing their way into the house via the skirting boards. Is there any easy way to keep them out without killing them?
I don't do testing class.
They're easier than the African ones. If they go through your house, they're marching through for some days and you have a bad time of it. They spread mustard around to keep them out, I think, but I don't know with our local ones.
Make sure there's no sugar lying around.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I've got a friend of mine who used to, before the ants came into the house, she'd put down ant powder so that they wouldn't come in, because they would, sense the ant powder and not come. So that she didn't put the ant powder once they'd come in. She did it before they got there. And then it meant they didn't kill them because the ants didn't get as far as the ant powder. We hope anyway. So yeah, that was her theory on doing that.
Yeah, in order to kill them, the powder has to be attractive to them.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's not good at all. Well, I'll have to call my friend and go, stop using the ant powder. Oh dear. Good. So I think we're kind of coming to our time now, but is there any takeaway points, things that we haven't covered, things you'll wake up at midnight going, oh, I wish I'd said this?
Just get out there and have a look at things, especially in this time of year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Since I let my garden go wild, I found orchids in there as well, the autumn ladies' tresses.
That's very exciting. That's a nice thing to find. I know that with Milton Road Cemetery, with the rewilding, we've also found orchids at Milton Road Cemetery as well.
Along by the step, yes. I saw a pyramidal orchid there once, but I think they stuck a tree in where it was growing.
Mm.
Spruce as well.
Yeah, I saw the green-winged or a green-winged orchid at Sand Point a couple of days ago. But last year there were thousands of them. This year I only found one. I think the sheep have eaten more.
There's usually a lot of those and uphill on the slope, huge numbers of them.
Yeah, that's really nice. Well, hopefully we've encouraged everybody to want to go out and have a wander around and see what we've got in our local nature. I shall see if anyone else has posted any comments or thoughts. No, just Debbie talking about the fact that Flying Ant Day was a nightmare. I can only imagine.
It always is.
Check your sandwich before taking a bite. Well, lovely, and thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom, sense of humour, and great expertise. On the 12th of May, I will be back, but this time I'm going to be back with Stephen Moss. He's the guy from Springwatch. He's also got his own article in the Guardian as well, and we're going to be talking about birds and bird life. So hopefully, if you fancy a conversation about that, start thinking about your questions now. And on the 12th of May at 6 o'clock, I'll be back again asking those questions about birds to Stephen Moss. Thank you ever so much, and have a good evening, and all get outside in the world. Now we have to do the Zoom traditional thing of everyone all at once. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for organising it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Bye.
Bye.